I used to think fear was simple, something that ended once you locked your doors and turned on a light. But fear doesn't live in the dark, it lives in the quiet moments after, when you think you're safe, when your heartbeat slows and the silence begins to sound. Like breathing.my name. Doesn't matter. What matters is that for one long night I learned how fragile the idea of safety really is. If you're listening to this, take it as a warning. Don't eat in your car alone at night. Don't linger under fluorescent lights that flicker too long. And whatever you do, don't look in your rearview mirror too slowly. If you're ready, I'll tell you what happened. I've always been careful, or at least I like to think I was. I never walked alone at night if I could help it, never parked too far from the lights, never lingered when my instincts told me to move. But that night, the rules felt blurry, softened by exhaustion and routine. It was just after midnight, the kind of hour when the world feels hollow and the air itself seems to hum with distance. The grocery store sat at the edge of town, its lot half empty, the neon sign buzzing like a trapped insect. I'd just finished a double shift, and my eyes burned from the hours I'd spent staring at computer screens and fluorescent bulbs. All I wanted was something quick, something easy, before I drove the long stretch home through the back roads. When I came out with a plastic bag and a tired mind, the air hit me like cold water. The lights in the store flickered once, then went out behind me, as the old cashier locked the door and disappeared into the dark. I was the last one left, the last trace of movement in that dim expanse of asphalt. I don't know why I didn't just drive away. Maybe I wanted to finish my sandwich. Maybe I wanted a few minutes to sit without anyone asking me for anything. My car felt like a bubble, warm and private, and I thought, what harm could there be in staying for a while? I unwrapped the sandwich, opened a bottle of water, and scrolled absently through my phone. There was something comforting about the glow of the screen, that tiny square of light in the emptiness around me. I put on an episode of a horror show, something to fill the silence, and leaned back against the seat. A few minutes passed. The world outside the windshield was still, almost painted, like a photograph of a night that never ended. Then, faintly, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no wind. The trees stood motionless. The flags on the far pole hung dead. It was a voice, I realized, faint, strained, coming from somewhere just outside. I looked up, and that's when I saw her. A woman stood in front of my car, framed by the dim security light that buzzed overhead. Her figure seemed out of place, like she'd stepped out of the darkness by accident. She was waving both arms, shouting something I couldn't quite make out. I froze, the sandwich halfway to my mouth. She was close, too close, only a few feet from my bumper. My first thought was that she needed help. My second, darker thought was that she was trying to make me open the door. She took a step closer, then pointed down, motioning for me to roll the window down. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear, but her tone was urgent. I could almost read the plea in her expression. Please, please, open up, but I didn't. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, my pulse thudding in my wrists. Something about her face unsettled me. Maybe it was how calm she looked despite the frantic gestures, or the faint, crooked smile tugging at her mouth. She shouted again, louder this time. I could finally make out the words, "There's someone in your back seat." For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. The words didn't register. Then they hit me all at once, cold and heavy. My mind flooded with every horror story, every warning I'd ever heard. I glanced at the rearview mirror, slowly, carefully, afraid of what I might see. Nothing. just the faint reflection of the empty back seat, the dark upholstery, the outline of the headrest. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something shifted behind me, that the shadows rippled slightly, just beyond my line of sight. My breath caught. I turned in my seat, fast, scanning the cabin. Empty. Utterly empty. When I looked back to the woman, she was closer. Her hand was on the driver's door handle, her fingers pale in the yellow light. I heard the faint click of the metal as she tried to pull it open, her smile still fixed, thin and sharp. "Let me help you," she said, her voice muffled through the glass. I shook my head, mouthed no, started the engine. She leaned down, pressing her face toward the window. That was when I finally saw her clearly. Her skin looked stretched, as if pulled too tight across her bones. Her eyes were wide, black at the center, reflecting my headlights. Her teeth were small, too small, and there were too many of them. She grinned. I slammed the car into reverse, the tires squealing against the pavement. For a second, she held onto the handle, matching my movement, her arm jerking as the door resisted. Then she let go, her expression unchanged, watching as I backed up. I drove out of the lot fast, heart hammering, my reflection trembling in the mirror. When I glanced back, she was still there, standing under the flickering light, one arm slowly rising as if to wave goodbye. The road home felt longer than usual. Every shadow in the headlights looked human. Every sound from the back seat made me flinch. I told myself she was a thief, a trickster, a desperate stranger. I told myself that over and over, but when I reached the empty intersection at the edge of town, the radio cut out for a moment, replaced by static, and under the static, faintly, a voice whispered my name. I turned the volume down, my hand shaking, and the whisper stopped. I tried to laugh, to tell myself it was nothing, but the laughter never came. As I turned onto my street, the headlights washed over the windows of my house, and for a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing inside, a silhouette by the living room curtain, perfectly still, perfectly waiting. I blinked and it was gone, but as I parked, I realized something that made my stomach twist. The curtain had been closed when I left. Now it was open. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood there, in the entryway, keys still in my hand, listening. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but waits for you to break it first. My reflection in the window looked pale and tired, and for a moment, I almost didn't recognize myself. The drive had taken less than 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every car that passed made me tense. Every headlight in the mirror made my pulse jump. I told myself again and again that she was just some stranger, maybe unstable, maybe trying to distract me for a robbery. It didn't matter. I was safe now, inside my house, the doors locked, the alarm armed, and yet the feeling followed me inside. It was like the air had changed, heavier somehow, as though the night had come in with me. I walked through the rooms one by one, checking doors, checking windows, touching the locks twice, just to be sure. My house wasn't big, just a one-story place on a quiet street, but in that moment, it felt endless, like the halls had grown longer, like the shadows had moved when I wasn't looking. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water, hands trembling so badly that the rim clicked against my teeth when I tried to drink. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, soft and constant, but even that started to sound strange, like whispering behind a wall. I told myself, out loud, that I was fine. "I'm fine," I said, to the empty air. The sound of my voice was small, uncertain, almost swallowed by the silence around me. I walked into the living room, where the curtain hung open, the one I'd seen from the car. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself that I'd just forgotten to close it that morning. But the truth was, I never left that curtain open. I liked privacy, always had. I reached for it, meaning to pull it shut, when I saw it. A faint smear on the glass, near the lower corner. It was shaped like a handprint, small, smudged, the kind left by someone pressing their palm lightly against the window. The print was on the outside. I froze, my fingers hovering just inches from the curtain. My first thought was that it had been there earlier, maybe a delivery person or a kid cutting through the yard. But the glass was clean. I'd washed it that weekend, and the handprint looked fresh, outlined in moisture, like someone had just been standing there, watching. My stomach turned. I forced myself to back away, to check the locks again, to do anything other than stare at that window. But I couldn't stop glancing back, half expecting to see her face appear on the other side of the glass. Eventually, I convinced myself to go to bed. It was late, nearly 1 a.m, and exhaustion had started to dull the edges of my fear. The house was locked, the blinds were closed, the alarm light blinked red by the door. I told myself that I was overreacting, that I was just tired, but that didn't explain the noise. It started softly, somewhere outside, a faint scrape, like shoes dragging on concrete. Then a pause. Then again. I held my breath. The sound was moving, slow, measured, circling the side of the house. I turned off my bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness, my pulse loud in my ears. The sound stopped near my window. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, very gently, 3 slow knocks against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I waited, staring at the faint outline of the curtain, praying it wouldn't shift, that there was no shadow waiting behind it. After a moment, the knocking stopped. Then came the whisper. It was faint, almost too quiet to hear, but unmistakably there. A woman's voice, thin and strained, like wind through a broken vent. "Let me in." I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to scream, to call someone, but my phone was in the kitchen, plugged in, far from where I sat frozen in the dark. I slowly pulled the blanket up to my chin, as if it could somehow shield me. As if thin cotton could protect me from whatever was outside. The whisper came again, a little louder this time. "Please, it's cold. Just open the door." My body wouldn't move. I couldn't look, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just sat there, counting the seconds, waiting for the sound to stop. Then came a new sound, deeper this time, the unmistakable rattle of the front door handle. Once, twice, then harder, like someone was testing it. I forced myself out of bed, moving as quietly as I could, every floorboard groaning like a scream. I peeked down the hallway, the front door faintly visible in the dim light of the alarm panel. The handle moved again, slow, deliberate. I took 1 step forward, then froze. A shadow passed across the thin slit of light under the door. It lingered there, just standing still, as if it knew I was watching. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I reached for my phone, realizing too late that it was still charging in the kitchen. I turned, ready to run for it, when the sound stopped completely. Silence. I stood there, in the middle of the hallway, listening. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing. I finally found the courage to move, to creep toward the kitchen, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone from the counter. My reflection in the black screen startled me, pale, hollow-eyed, wild. I almost didn't recognize myself. I was about to dial 911 when I saw something at the edge of the window. A face, pressed against the glass, just barely visible through the thin layer of condensation. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, teeth glinting faintly in the dark. She was smiling, and then she knocked. Once, slowly, tap. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a heartbeat. When I blinked, she was gone. Only the faint outline of her breath remained, fading slowly down the glass. For a long time, I couldn't move. I just stood there in the dark kitchen, staring at the window where her face had been. The condensation was still fading, that faint outline of breath dissolving into the glass, as though she'd never been there at all. I waited for the sound again, another tap, another whisper, but nothing came. Only the low hum of the refrigerator and the slow, trembling sound of my own breathing. It was 1:23 a.m. I remember the time because the glowing numbers on the microwave were the only light in the room. I stared at them for what felt like hours, unable to decide what to do. Call the police, maybe. Tell them someone was outside. But what would I say exactly? That a woman who smiled like a broken doll was knocking on my windows and whispering to be let in. I finally moved, slow and stiff, my muscles tight with exhaustion and fear. I crept down the hallway again, listening for anything, the creak of a floorboard, a shuffle outside, a breath that didn't belong to me. Each step felt too loud, like the house itself was warning me to stop. In the living room, I pulled the curtain back just an inch. The yard was empty. The porch light cast long shadows across the grass, but there was no one there. Not the woman, not anyone. Just the faint trail of fog clinging to the glass, as if she had been standing there moments before. I told myself that I had imagined it, that I was tired, that my mind was conjuring shapes from fear. I even managed a shaky laugh. Get it together, I whispered to myself. You're fine, you're just tired. But when I turned back toward the hallway, I heard it again. Knock, not from the window this time. From inside the house. My blood went cold. I froze, my eyes scanning the walls, the ceiling, the doors. The sound had been faint but clear, wood on wood, like knuckles against a hollow frame. I waited, barely breathing. Knock. Knock. This time, it came from the far end of the hall, near the guest room I never used. The one with the old wooden door that always stuck a little when you tried to open it. Every instinct told me to leave, to run, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. I found myself walking toward the sound, as though something deeper, something primal, wanted to know what waited on the other side. The hallway stretched longer than it ever had before, shadows rippling along the floor, the air heavy and warm. My hand brushed the wall as I walked, the texture of the paint grounding me, reminding me that I was still here, still awake, still alive. When I reached the guest room door, I stopped. My reflection wavered faintly in the small mirror hanging beside it. My face looked wrong, pale, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I waited. Nothing. Then, just as I started to step back, the door creaked. Slowly, painfully, it opened a few inches on its own. The darkness inside was thick, almost physical, pressing against the light from the hall. I felt a chill rise up my spine, the kind that starts deep in your bones. Hello. I whispered, the word dry and cracked. No answer. I reached for the doorknob, and when my fingers touched the cold metal, another sound came, a faint scrape, like nails dragging across the inside of the door. I stumbled back, heart pounding. as the gap widened, just enough for me to see inside. It was empty, completely empty. The old twin bed, the dresser, the lamp in the corner, all there, untouched, exactly as I'd left them. But something felt wrong. The air inside that room was colder, thicker, and the smell, faintly metallic, like rain hitting rust, hung in the air. I stood there for a moment, staring into the dark, trying to understand what had just happened. And that's when I noticed something strange. The mirror, the small one hanging beside the door, my reflection in it had changed. I could see myself clearly, pale and shaking, but behind me, faintly, the shape of a woman stood in the hallway. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the air still. My reflection, when I turned back, was normal again. That was the moment I finally broke. I slammed the door shut, locked it, backed away, and whispered to myself that it was over, that I was done, that whatever was happening, it was staying in that room. But deep down, I knew better. I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and called the police. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone twice. I told the dispatcher that I thought someone was outside my house, possibly trying to break in. She was calm, professional, told me to stay on the line until the officers arrived. It took 7 minutes for them to get there. 7 long minutes of waiting in silence, every sound amplified, every tick of the clock feeling like a heartbeat in the dark. When they finally arrived, 2 officers swept the property. They checked every window, every door, every inch of the yard. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Nothing. They told me I was probably just tired, that maybe I'd seen a trick of the light. They said it was late, that I should get some rest. I nodded, pretending to believe them. After they left, I sat in the silence again. The clock read 2:41 a.m. I stared at the window where the woman had been, where her breath had fogged the glass. The faint outline of her face was gone now. For a while, I thought it might be over, but as I sat there, I heard one final sound. From somewhere deep inside the house, faint but unmistakable, came a whisper, "Let me in." Then a soft, deliberate knock, not on a door, not on a window, but from inside the wall behind me. Knock, and again, knock. That night, I didn't sleep, not even for a second. I sat on the couch, wrapped in the dim light from the lamp, staring at the wall where the last knock had come from. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something, a faint creak, a whisper of movement, but I told myself it was just the house settling, just old pipes, just my imagination. But the silence, it felt too heavy, too deliberate, like something was waiting, listening. Around 3:15 a.m., I heard it again. A soft sound, this time from the porch, not a knock, but the drag of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving just beyond the front door. I froze, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped. Then, a voice, low, distant, distorted, as if it came through water. "Please, let me in." My skin crawled. It was her. I knew it. The same woman from the window. The same whisper that had slithered through the walls. For a long moment, I didn't move. My pulse thudded in my ears, loud enough to drown out everything else. Then I reached for my phone again, my hand trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. I dialed 911, but before I could hit call, the voice spoke again, this time closer. "Why are you ignoring me?" The words weren't angry. They were soft, almost hurt, like a child who didn't understand why they weren't being answered. Something inside me cracked. Against every instinct, I stood up. I walked toward the front door, slowly, quietly, my bare feet barely touching the floor. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my head. I stopped just a few feet from the door. The porch light outside flickered once, then died, plunging the world beyond the glass into darkness. The air turned cold, and I could see my breath again. "Who are you?" I whispered. For a second, nothing. Then, the faint sound of laughter, not joyful, not kind, but soft and broken, like someone laughing through tears. "You don't remember me," she said. Her voice was closer now, right against the door, like her mouth was pressed to the wood. I could hear the shape of her breath between words. My throat tightened. "I don't know you," I said. "Go away, or I'll call the police." Silence. Then, in a whisper so faint I almost missed it, she said, "You already did." Every muscle in my body locked. She knew. Somehow, she knew. I stumbled back, my eyes darting to the windows, the hallway, the ceiling, anywhere there could be movement. But there was nothing. Only the sound of my own breath, ragged, uneven. Then the doorknob turned, slowly, gently. The metal clicked once, twice, as if tested from the other side. That was when I ran. I didn't think. I just moved, down the hallway, past the kitchen, into my bedroom. I slammed the door shut, locked it, shoved the dresser in front of it. My body was shaking so violently I could barely stand. I grabbed my phone again, and this time I managed to call. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the line. I told her someone was outside again, trying to get in. She told me to stay where I was, that officers were on their way. Minutes stretched like hours. Outside, the voice kept speaking. Not shouting, not threatening, just talking softly, like she was having a conversation with someone who refused to answer. "Do you remember the road?" she whispered. The rain, the headlights, the sound of glass? I didn't know what she meant. None of it made sense. But her tone, the way she said it, it was full of something deeper. Grief, maybe. Or anger, twisted into sadness. And then, the sound changed. The whispering stopped. The footsteps began again, this time moving away, fading into the night. I waited. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. When the police arrived, they found nothing again. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Just the same empty porch, the same quiet street. One of the officers, a younger guy, tried to reassure me. He said people sometimes imagine things when they're scared, that maybe it was just someone passing by. I nodded, pretending to agree, though I could still feel her voice vibrating inside my chest. After they left, I double-checked every lock, every window, every corner. Everything was sealed tight. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was close, that even if she wasn't outside anymore, she hadn't left. Around 4 a.m., I finally sat back on the bed, exhausted. I left the lamp on, just in case, and that's when I heard it. Not outside. Not from the porch. From inside my phone. A faint voice, whispering through the speaker. Though no one was on the line. It said, "You looked away." The words were faint, static-laced, but I heard them clearly. Then came the sound of rain, soft at first, then louder, until it filled the room, like I was back on a wet highway. I pulled the phone away, staring at the screen. No call, no notification, nothing. But the sound didn't stop. The rain grew louder, closer, until I swore I could smell it, that same metallic scent, mixed with something else. Gasoline. My stomach turned. I dropped the phone, stumbled back, and stared as the screen flickered once, twice, and then, for just a moment, an image appeared. A windshield. Cracked, wet, reflecting headlights through the storm. Then it was gone. Silence returned, and in that silence, a whisper so close it felt like it came from just behind my ear. "You left me there." I spun around, but the room was empty. The air was still. The lamp flickered once, dimmed, then steadied again. I stood there, shaking, staring at the space where no one stood, and realized she wasn't trying to get in anymore. She was already inside. For a long time, I just stood there, staring into the space behind me, waiting for something to move, something to breathe, something to prove that what I'd just heard wasn't in my head. But the air stayed still, the shadows stayed where they were, and the only sound was my pulse, drumming inside my ears. I picked up my phone again, my fingers trembling. The screen was black now, cold, silent, as if nothing had ever happened. No sound, no image, no rain. Just my reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed. I turned the phone over in my hands, searching for warmth, for the faint hum of life, but it was gone. The battery was dead. I didn't remember it being that low. I plugged it into the charger on my nightstand, watching the faint red light blink to life. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing at my temples, whispering to myself that it was stress, exhaustion, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But the voice, her voice, it had been so close, too close. I stood slowly and crossed the room toward the door. The dresser I'd shoved there earlier felt heavier now, as if it had absorbed all the weight of my fear. I pushed it aside inch by inch, the wood scraping softly against the floor. The hallway beyond was pitch black. I leaned close to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. Only silence, deep and waiting. I opened the door. The hinge let out a faint creak, and the smell of cold air drifted in, not the outside cold, but that strange, heavy chill that clings to a place where something has lingered too long. I stepped into the hallway, barefoot, my breath trembling in the dim light spilling from my bedroom. The shadows stretched long and uneven across the walls, shifting slightly with every flicker of the bulb, and then I noticed something strange. At the end of the hallway, where the light didn't quite reach, the air shimmered, just a little, like heat rising off asphalt. I blinked, thinking it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But it was still there, a faint distortion, like the space itself was bending, pulsing softly. I took a step closer. The air grew colder, sharper, until it burned my lungs. My throat ached with each breath. Another step, and then a sound, soft, rhythmic. Not footsteps, not breathing, but something in between. Like fabric dragging along the wall. "Hello," I whispered, though I hated how small my voice sounded in that long corridor. The sound stopped. I stood still, every nerve in my body waiting. Then, slowly, from the darkness at the end of the hall, came a faint, wet sound, like water dripping onto wood. Drip, drip, drip. I swallowed hard, my eyes locked on the shadows. "Who's there?" I tried again, my voice cracking. No answer. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, or tried to. It flickered once, then cut out completely. The battery icon flashed red again before the screen went dark. Impossible. I backed away, my hand brushing against the wall to steady myself. That's when I felt it, the wallpaper, damp beneath my fingers. I looked down. My fingertips were wet. When I held them up to the light from my bedroom, I saw that the moisture wasn't clear. It was red. A cold rush of dread spread through me. I wiped my hand against my pajama pants, leaving a dark smear. The dripping sound grew louder now, faster. Drip, drip, drip. Then came the smell, faint but unmistakable. Iron, copper, blood. I wanted to run, but something deep in my chest told me to look, to see. Because part of me already knew what I'd find. I took one step forward, then another. The shadows shifted again, the distortion rippling as I got closer, and then I saw it. A single footprint on the floorboards. Bare, small, wet, another step beside it, then another. Leading down the hall, they were fresh. I followed them slowly, each breath sharp and uneven. The trail ended just before the hallway turned into the living room. I hesitated, then peeked around the corner, empty. The house was still, silent, as though it were holding its breath with me. Then, from behind me, a whisper, "Why are you following me?" I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs, but there was nothing there. Only darkness. The hallway light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I stood frozen, blind, the world around me swallowed by black. Somewhere in the dark, I heard movement, a soft shuffle, followed by another faint drip. The air grew colder still. Then, the sound of breathing, right beside me, slow, deliberate, in and out. I could almost feel the air brushing my cheek, the faint scent of rain and earth mixed with something sour, something old. I didn't move. Couldn't move, and then she spoke again, this time whispering directly into my ear, "You were supposed to stop." My legs gave out. I stumbled backward into the wall, clutching my chest, my breath coming in broken gasps. I fumbled for the door frame, found it, and darted back into my room, slamming the door shut behind me. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I slid to the floor, pressing my back against the dresser I'd shoved against the door again, my mind reeling, her voice, her words. The way she said them, not angry, not mocking, but full of something else. Disappointment. "You were supposed to stop." Stop what? I sat there for what felt like hours, my eyes fixed on the door. Nothing else happened. No more footsteps, no more whispers. Just silence. When dawn finally came, pale light bleeding through the curtains, I felt almost delirious with relief. But when I stood, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the floor, by the edge of the bed, was a small puddle, dark, sticky, half-dried. And in the middle of it, a footprint, small, bare, facing the door. As though someone had been standing there, watching me sleep. The night had stretched itself long before I even realized I'd been standing at the window for hours, staring at the empty street, my hands pressed to the glass as if my body could somehow hold the world in place. But it wasn't empty. I knew it. I could feel it in my chest, a low hum of expectation, like the air itself was holding its breath. Every creak of the floorboards behind me, every distant rustle of leaves, made me flinch. My apartment had never felt so alive, so aware, and yet so suffocatingly dangerous. I forced myself to look away from the window and switched on the porch light. The yellow glow spilled over the steps, over the cracked concrete, over the tiny garden I'd half forgotten existed. That light was supposed to make me feel safe. I'd installed it after a burglary down the block years ago. But tonight it felt almost obscene, a beacon. A signal. I didn't know why I was even considering going outside. Rationally, I told myself, don't go. Stay inside. Lock everything. Keep your phone close. And yet, I found myself pulling the door open, feeling the chill of the night brush against my skin. The wind whispered through the trees in the yard, and I could hear the faintest sound of shoes shuffling over gravel. There was someone there. I froze. The glow from the porch light revealed a shadow at the edge of my driveway, a figure moving in the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She was tall, impossibly still, and for a split second, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. But then she lifted her head, and I recognized her pale coat, the unnatural tilt of her shoulders, the way the light caught her face just enough to reveal that twisted, tight smile. She was waiting. I wanted to slam the door, run upstairs, hide anywhere. And yet something fear, curiosity, or sheer disbelief rooted me in place. She lifted a hand, just a small gesture, a finger pointing toward the garden path. The one that led behind my house. I didn't move. A voice whispered behind me. Not real, not in the room, but almost inside my head. Come outside. I stumbled back into the living room, slammed the door shut, and pressed my ear against it. The shuffling had stopped. The world outside was quiet again, but the feeling didn't leave. Something was lingering under the porch light, waiting, watching. A predator disguised in human skin. I locked the door again, checked every window, and finally sat on the couch, my knees pressed to my chest, my phone clutched tightly in trembling hands. My reflection in the black screen stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, utterly exposed, and then I heard it. A faint scratching sound at the front door. Not loud, not enough to make a neighbor suspicious, just soft, deliberate, a rhythm almost. Communicative. I held my breath. The scratching stopped. I told myself it was nothing, that it had to be nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, somewhere in the shadows, a witness to my fear, savoring it. The porch light flickered once, twice, and then went out. Silence, and yet I could swear the shadow had moved closer. The phone rang before I could even pick up my thoughts. Its shrill tone cut through the oppressive silence like a knife. My hands shook as I snatched it off the counter, expecting a wrong number, a friend joking, anything, but it wasn't a friend. The line was dead. For a long moment, I held it to my ear, hearing nothing. Then, a soft exhale, wet, ragged, deliberate. A human breath, impossibly close. I dropped the phone as though it burned my hand. The line went dead again. I checked the number. Unknown. Not even a local code. Just a void of digits. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room and forget it existed. But the curiosity that fear breeds kept me hovering above it, trembling, waiting for the next sound. And it came faint at first, then clearer, breathing, slow and deliberate, synchronized with my own. I realized, horrifyingly, it was imitating me. Every inhale, every exhale, every tiny tremor of panic I felt, it matched. I could almost sense it leaning closer, waiting for me to lower my guard. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The darkness of the apartment seemed to contract, pressing down on me, bending the light from the street lamp into jagged, uncertain shapes. I finally slammed the phone down, covering my ears, shaking my head violently. My apartment had never seemed smaller, my walls never so thin, the air so heavy. Every shadow became a threat. Every whisper of wind was a voice. I walked toward the kitchen to pour water, my footsteps loud against the wooden floor. That's when I saw it in the reflection of the fridge door, a shadow, not my own, standing behind me for the briefest fraction of a second. I spun. Nothing. Just the fridge humming, the tap dripping. But I could feel it. Always there. Waiting, and then the phone rang again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I hid behind the kitchen island, pressed to the cold tile, hearing the dial tone carry a sinister rhythm through the room. The breathing started again, not through the line this time, but somewhere in the apartment. Close. So close I could feel the warmth of its presence on my neck. I dared to peek around the counter. The living room was empty. The hallway, empty. Every doorway a black pit, swallowing the light, but the sound persisted, deliberate, calculated. And then I realized the breathing wasn't coming from anywhere in the apartment. It was coming from inside me. I thought I had reached a limit, a boundary where fear had to pause. But the knock on the door erased every boundary I'd ever known. Slow at first, then harder, then rhythmic, impatient, methodical. It didn't pause long enough for me to catch my breath. I counted seconds. Each knock a lifetime. I approached the door slowly, every muscle tense, heart hammering. The viewer non-existent, of course. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. Silence, then a whisper. Almost a question. Open the door. I stumbled back. My hands clawed at the locks, checking again, every single bolt. The knocking didn't stop. It never paused long enough for logic to intervene. Each slam reverberated through the floorboards, through my chest, through my mind. I called out, voice shaking, "Who's there?" Nothing. Then a name. My name. Soft, elongated, deliberate. Your name. I froze. Only someone who knew me could speak that way. Only someone inside my life. My apartment. But the windows were locked. The doors bolted. Every conceivable entrance accounted for. And yet, the knocking continued. I crept to the side window and peered through the blinds. Nothing. Darkness. Empty street. Empty sidewalk. And yet, my gut screamed she is out there. Waiting. Watching. Enjoying. I could almost feel her eyes through the glass. Watching, always. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the knocking stopped. Silence. Thick enough to choke on. But when I finally let my gaze drift back to the front door, a single piece of paper lay on the welcome mat. A message, written in jagged, almost childish scrawl. I've been inside all along. The blinds had been drawn for hours, but the night felt too alive, too cruel, too aware of me to allow me the comfort of darkness. Every shadow seemed to flicker, to twist, to become something more than it should be. I sat on the edge of the couch, knees pressed to my chest, staring at the living room window, trying to will my own reflection into bravery. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see. But something inside me, the same dangerous curiosity that had kept me watching shadows for nights on end, whispered, "Look." I edged toward the window, every step deliberate, every muscle taut with tension. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock, but silence had never been comforting in the past 24 hours. It felt like a trap, a canvas on which she could paint her presence without sound. The curtains swayed slightly in the night breeze, a small movement, almost innocent. Almost. And then I saw it, the face, pale. Too pale. The kind of color that belongs to someone who has never felt the sun on their skin. The eyes were impossible, deep-set, glistening wet like obsidian stones slick with some hidden river, unblinking, calculating, perfectly still. Her lips were drawn into a grotesque smile, stretched too thin across her cheeks, teeth too numerous and small, shining in the weak streetlight outside. I froze. My body refused to move. My heart skipped a beat, and then another. I could see her breathing through the curtain, just barely, the fabric brushing against her skin like a whisper, a promise, a threat. She tilted her head, and the movement was deliberate, casual, as if she had all the time in the world to study me, to learn every tremor in my hands, every twitch of my eyes, every unsteady breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself across the room and never look back. I wanted to call for help, but none of that was possible. My body, and perhaps my mind, had frozen, paralyzed by the perfect terror of her gaze. For a moment, she didn't move. And in that moment, I felt something worse than fear: recognition. Somehow, in that pale, twisted face, there was familiarity. Something that whispered you should have known better. She was a mirror of the world's cruel possibilities, a reflection of every moment I had let my guard down. And she was smiling. That same cruel, private smile I had seen first in the parking lot, the one that promised secrets, promises, and pain. And then she moved, just a fraction. Tilt of the head, slight step back. It shouldn't have been enough to terrify me more, but it was. It was everything. The way she moved, deliberate and silent, as if gravity itself obeyed her, made my blood turn to ice. I felt it in my bones. She could appear anywhere, anytime. And she was patient. She could wait forever to... I backed away from the window, trying not to make a sound, but my heart thumped against my ribcage like a drum in a dark cathedral. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls breathing, the shadows stretching long fingers toward me. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, a hallucination born of exhaustion and fear. But rational thoughts had no power here. Her face had already infected my mind. I moved toward the kitchen, every step measured, careful not to trip or stumble. The apartment felt alien, every familiar object suddenly strange. The couch, the coffee table, the walls, all of it seemed to conspire against me. I could feel her presence behind me, hovering, patient, watching every inch of space I occupied. The rational part of my mind screamed, "Call someone. Call 911. Get out." But my body refused to comply, and then I heard it dot a soft, wet exhale. Close. Closer than any sound should be able to reach in this apartment. I turned slowly, not wanting to provoke her, not wanting to acknowledge her existence. And there she was, not fully visible, not fully present, but a shadow of her own impossibility, the very air around her pulsing with her intent. She didn't move her lips. She didn't speak. And yet I heard her voice clearly in my mind. "I see you." I stumbled back again, falling to the floor, the lamp toppling beside me with a crash that somehow felt wrong, as if even noise could be twisted into her favor. My hands pressed to my ears, but it was useless. The sound was inside me now. The presence was inside me now. My apartment, my sanctuary, my world, all violated. The blinds rattled. A flicker of movement. She shifted slightly, tilting her head again, studying me, studying my fear, measuring it, tasting it. I could almost see the contours of her thoughts in the way she moved, slow, deliberate, impossible. It wasn't just a person. It was something older, patient, perfected. I crawled toward the corner, pressed against the wall, trying to make myself small. My eyes never left the curtain. I wanted to close them, but I couldn't. Fear had rooted me in place. Fear had sharpened my senses. Fear had made me acutely aware of every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat. And then, in the silence, I saw something that made my stomach turn cold. Her hand. Pale, thin, impossibly long fingers curling around the edge of the curtain. Slowly, deliberately, as if to remind me that the barrier between us was nothing more than a thin sheet of fabric, a fragile illusion. The curtain twitched slightly. The smile widened. The eyes glimmered wet and knowing. She was patient. She had all the time in the world. And she was enjoying this. I realized then, with a bone-deep certainty, that she would not leave. That I would never be safe. That every shadow, every reflection, every glance out a window could contain her. That she had been patient, and now she had claimed her place in my world. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt. But my voice had failed me. My legs had failed me. Only my eyes were alive, wide, unblinking, locked on her pale, impossible face. And in that moment, just as I thought my mind could not take any more, the streetlight outside flickered. Her face disappeared. The curtain fell still. The night returned to its quiet hum, indifferent, patient. I collapsed onto the floor, hands pressed to my ears, trying to breathe, trying to believe. And then, so faint it could almost have been imagined, I heard the whisper, "I am still here." The sun rose slowly that morning, but it was weak, pale, and uncertain, as if it, too, feared what might be waiting in the street outside. I hadn't slept, not even for a few minutes. My eyes were red, my body a knot of tension. I'd spent the night in the corner of my living room, every muscle coiled, every sound amplified 100-fold. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind against the windows made my heart leap into my throat. I hadn't dared move, not even to check the front door, not even to touch the phone. And then I saw it. A small cassette tape lying squarely in the center of my doorstep. Its presence was so deliberate, so unnervingly calm, that I had to step back and breathe. I stared at it for what felt like hours, afraid that reaching for it would somehow trigger something I wasn't prepared to face. The plastic casing glinted faintly in the weak morning light. There was no note, no markings, nothing to explain why it was there, just the object itself, impossibly ordinary and impossibly terrifying. I wanted to leave it. I wanted to throw it away without touching it, but my curiosity, that dangerous, stupid curiosity that had kept me watching shadows all night, refused to let me. My hands trembled violently as I picked it up. Cold, heavy, solid. The label was blank. Not even a scratch. Not even a mark. I went inside and set it on the coffee table, the one place I thought might feel safe, though I knew nothing in the apartment felt safe anymore. The cassette sat there, almost mocking me. I stared at it, willing it to reveal itself, willing it to move, willing something, anything, to make sense. My phone rang then, shrill, urgent, and I jumped as if someone had slapped me. But it was just a robocall. A cruel reminder that the world outside my apartment carried on, indifferent to the horror that had taken up residence in my life. I found my old stereo in the corner of the living room, dust thick on the surfaces, the wires curling like lazy snakes. My fingers shook as I plugged it in. Each motion felt monumental. The static of electricity hissed through the speakers as I inserted the tape. Nothing. Then, the hiss became louder, more insistent. The tape began to roll. And then I heard it, her voice, soft, deliberate, intimate, uncomfortably close. "I've been with you since the car, since the light, since the very first moment you didn't lock your doors fast enough. I've never left. I've always been here, watching, waiting." The words weren't angry, not threatening in a traditional sense. They were calm. They were intimate. They were worse than anything I had ever feared. Her voice carried the weight of someone who knew every movement, every thought, every secret heartbeat. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound seeped in anyway, filling the room, filling my body, filling my very bones. Then there was a pause. The static hissed again, soft and menacing, like the whisper of wind in a graveyard. Then another sound, faint at first, then closer, a slow, deliberate exhale. Wet, heavy, human, but not human. It pressed against me, against the floorboards, against the walls. I could feel it curling around me like a living thing. I dropped the tape. It hit the floor with a hollow thud. The player groaned, skipped, then went silent. And the apartment, for the briefest moment, was quiet. I thought I could breathe again. I thought maybe I had survived it, but then I heard it. A soft, deliberate creak from behind me. My spine froze. My head turned, painfully slow, as if the muscles themselves feared what they would reveal. The hallway was empty. Shadows stretched along the walls, stretching and twisting in ways that didn't obey the light. My bedroom door was closed. The closet doors were closed. The living room, the kitchen, every corner of my apartment looked exactly the same. Yet something had changed. I could feel her presence pressed against the back of my neck. Her breath brushed the nape of my shoulder. I could feel the warmth of her body where it shouldn't be, the impossibility of someone being so close, yet unseen. My hands clawed at the couch, my nails digging into the fabric, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst, and then I saw it in the corner of my vision, a flicker of pale, a tilt of her head, the off-white coat, the grotesque, impossibly stretched smile, eyes glinting wet and sharp. She moved silently, a predator whose silence was heavier than my entire apartment. I couldn't turn. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even think. Every instinct, every muscle, every reflex told me to run, to bolt, to vanish, but I was paralyzed. "I've been patient," she whispered. "I've let you think you were alone, but you never were, and you never will be." The words were in my mind now, not the tape, not the speakers, but inside me. Her breath, her presence, her voice, they were stitched into my nerves. I could feel them crawling under my skin, coiling around my chest, wrapping my heart in an icy grip. Then the footsteps began. Slow, deliberate, measured. Not running, not panicked, not clumsy, purposeful. Approaching from the hallway, approaching from the shadows. I dared a glance to the side. Nothing. The apartment remained cruelly empty, but the sound continued. Closer, closer. Every step echoing like a drumbeat of inevitability. I realized then, in a sudden, horrifying clarity, that it didn't matter how many locks I had. It didn't matter how many doors I bolted. She had been inside me long before she appeared at the car, long before the porch light, long before the tape. She had been waiting, watching, following, learning. And now she was here. The static hissed again from the fallen tape. The sound wasn't in the player anymore. It was in the room, in the air, in my chest, in my head. And I could hear her whisper one final thing. The last words that would echo for hours, days, perhaps forever. "I am home." And in the corner of my eye, I saw her pale, still, smiling, watching the last thing I would ever forget.